Welcome back to Science Insanity. Before we begin, there's a timestamp up on screen. Skip to that if you don't care about the intro part of this video and a few things we need to cover, and instead want to just get straight into the lore. Firstly, there's a number of things that happened. Why is the video Thursday instead of Wednesday? Well, that leads into the first thing we gotta cover. Steve. Unfortunately, our lovable tag-along is not here today, so the video might be a little different, might seem a little odd compared to what I was doing before. The tone and cadence might be a little different because I'm talking to myself, not to my friend, and the reason he's not here is because, unfortunately, real life comes first. He suffered a pretty nasty back injury and is currently spending a few days just literally comatose in his bed trying to turn off his pain receptors. He's probably going to be back for the next couple episodes and onwards from then, but you know, shit happens, and I don't have the heart to ask him to bust his ass out of bed to record some stupid nerd shit with me, so he's not here today. Second, addressing some complaints that I saw on the previous videos. Firstly, I need to get something out of the way. Guys, I am a professional idiot. I am basically entirely here for fun and entertainment and to just get new people into the hobbies and the universes that I love. I am not here to break down super in-depth and accurate lore. I think it's more important to use analogy, metaphor, and jokes to get people a general understanding than it is to spend hours and hours and hours going over the nitty-gritty details of all the stuff related to the lore. I would also never be able to do that because Battletech has an absolute ocean of lore and I'm the equivalent of a puddle, but you get the idea. Also, I am not the Black Pants Legion level of, caliber of commentator here. I don't wake up in the morning, brush my teeth with whiskey, and then gargle gravel for an hour before delivering a 2-hour sermon on the Warhammer. That is just not who I am, and I will never be able to measure up to the level of grating chutzpah that man has. Also, as a little bit of an aside, this one is more specifically for the Capellans among you. I am well aware that many of you were angry. Don't worry, I agree with your complaints. That faction is really cool. There is a lot really worth talking about, and I didn't do them a whole lot of justice because I was too busy having fun with, poking fun at the fact that the Capellans, no matter what anyone says, are Battletech's whipping boy. Their role in the universe is to be the underdog of the inner sphere. That's just how it is. We will, however, in the future, be covering way more in-depth all of the major factions and stuff because all of them deserve to be picked over with a fine-tooth comb. Don't worry, Capellans, you'll get your day in the sun as the coolest faction in the inner sphere and the scrappiest underdog to ever punch up. It'll come, don't worry. And last thing we want to talk about, where the hell did all of you come from? I swear to God, I turned my back and we're at 15,000 views or something on the whole channel, most of which came from the first two videos, and 400 subscribers. That's insane to me. I didn't expect Science Insanity to get anywhere near this level of support for months or even years down the line, because that was my experience with my first YouTube channel. So, damn, it's going real well. Thank you very much for everyone that stuck around and decided that my channel was worth watching and worth paying attention to. I appreciate you greatly, and I'm glad that you find this stuff enjoyable, because I pour a lot of heart and soul into it. I love science fiction, and I'm glad that you guys do as well. And with that out of the way, let's finally start the actual video, shall we? Only 3.5 minutes in, and we finally actually get to the content, yay. But today we are going to be covering the CLANS, everyone's favorite space eugenicists and rabid, totally not religious fanatics about Alexander Kerensky. We will explain all of what that means to come, but first, I would like to say that this is a 3-parter. We are going to be covering the initial flight of the Star League into deep space, the formation of the clans, and all of their neat little quirky bits of their culture and some of their history in this video. The next video is going to be covering the return of the clans, the invasion of the inner sphere, and the massive upset that caused to the political and geographical landscape of Battletech. And then third and finally, the third part of this series, we are going to be covering the Battle of Tukiad, the breaking of the clans back upon the bulwark of Comstar, the unbelievable cojones of the commander, and the fanatical performance of Comstar's Comguard. That was a sentence, and I said it first try. Let's go. So, for anyone that was here for the first episode and a little bit for the end of the second, where we talked about the clans in passing, or we mentioned some of their battle mechs, the clans, what are they? Well, the syllabus for today's video, we're going to briefly talk about their origin, their history, where they came from, why Alexander Kerensky is the biggest dicked man in all of science fiction, and where they ended up in far deep space. So, let's start with their history. Long ago, during the age of the Super Space UN, after Amaris, the fat bib-wearing lardass he was, decided to ruin everything, the Star League and the Inner Sphere just started falling apart. We are talking like the absolute lowest point of the series. Captain America Civil War, the Allies and all of these people, they're at each other's throats, they're ready to murder each other. It's about to go down, right? The Amaris Civil War destabilized everything, and Alexander Kerensky, after firmly putting him back in his box 6 feet underground where he belonged, was stuck in the horrible position that he was in control of the biggest military in human history, the Star League, with all of its battle mechs, all of its technology, all of its warships, everything, and he now had 5 toddlers screaming at one another over who gets the cookie. Those 5 toddlers being the Great Houses and the cookie being the Star League. Because after the Cameron line, the royal line of the Terran hegemony, was essentially killed off and the Star League dissolved, every single one of the Great Houses basically at the same time went, whoa, the king is dead. What? I guess that means I have to be the king now. You all have to be my subjects. It's the natural order of things. And when you have 5 incredibly powerful, massively industrialized factions all wielding turbonuclear weapons, and they all walk into the same room doing that, you can imagine how definitely not good the resulting scenario would be. That's what caused the Succession Wars, which we talked about briefly in the first episode, history and general lore primer thing, whatever, of the Inner Sphere. However, Alexander Kerensky, tired after years of war, because the Amaris Civil War didn't last a few months. This was a long, grueling endeavor where Alexander Kerensky had to essentially muster the sum force of the Star League and fight a massive civil war across the width and breadth of the Inner Sphere, basically serving as the main and central commander of the entire Star League military. Man was doing a real good job with what he had. Wow, okay, I was wondering what that bong sound was, but as it turns out, I flicked my microphone stand, and physics went Lamau massive bong, and I can't even get rid of it, because it's very, it's fine, I'll leave it in, whatever, it's cool. I don't have Steve here to ask silly questions and laugh along with, so we gotta get our entertainment somehow. But like I was saying, after the incredible violence that finally came to an end, Alexander Kerensky basically had no time to rest. It was abundantly obvious that even though one of the most devastating wars in recent human history had just come to an end, a civil war, mind you, which also meant that political instability was absolutely rampant across the Inner Sphere, the entirety of humanity was gearing up for another conflict. The Rimworlds and basically periphery and deep periphery nations outside the Inner Sphere were all fortifying one another, getting ready to fight back against what they saw as foreign invaders. All of the Great Houses were gearing up for massive military conflicts against one another to determine who gets to be the new king of the Star League, and since the Terran hegemony had de facto become the Star League, all of their territory was collapsing. Most of it was just suffering from a lack of any kind of administration, or was being absolutely gobbled up by the other Great Houses in a race to get to Terra and conquer it, because whoever holds Terra can claim de facto leadership of the Star League. It's like whoever has the ancient Chinese emperor when they're a child gets to say that I'm the new regent of China. That kind of thing, basically. Now, you may be wondering, why didn't Alexander Kerensky just take over? Because he was actually presented the option several times, and in fact, this just goes to show this man's unflinching character. Because even though the Star League was coming to an end and it was in its twilight years, he spent the last years of stability in the Inner Sphere, the last few days that he had bought with his conflict against Amaris, to try to reconcile the differences of the Great Houses and bring them together to try to prevent the fall of the Star League. An absolutely futile endeavor, but one made all the more impressive by the fact that he was offered unlimited power and a blank check. He was told multiple times by multiple different commanders and admirals that should he ask, the entire might of the Star League military would back his claim for the title of First Lord of the Star League. Here he was, being presented a blank check by the biggest military in human history, saying that if he wanted to become dictator for life, and his family becoming the new first lords of the Star League, they would back him. And after the great houses released a statement saying that they just couldn't come to an agreement and they were dissolving the Star League, the military was like, okay, Kerensky, let's go, buddy. Let's put you on the throne. It's time for you to become king. And he turned it down. He chose, to the very last moment, to stay loyal to the principles of the Star League, not to betray it, and not follow the same path as Amaris. The man was literally offered everything, no strings attached, on a golden platter, and all he would need to do is sacrifice his morals and integrity. And he said no. And that is just the biggest dick thing anyone can ever do. And that leads us to the Great Exodus. Operation Exodus, in fact. This is when Alexander Kerensky realized that the writing was on the wall. The Star League was dead, the great houses were gearing up for the greatest war in human history since the Star League Civil War, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The dominoes had already started falling, and he couldn't arrest their progress. So instead, he decided that he wouldn't add to the suffering. He would no longer continue pointless conflicts where billions would die for no other reason than the ego of the madmen in charge. And he decided that he would simply leave, along with literally everything else. In fact, this is probably the greatest example of I'm taking my ball and going home. Eric Cartman could learn something from Alexander Kerensky, because this man decided, I'm taking the entirety of everything that's left of the Star League, and I'm leaving you idiots to try not to kill each other alone while I dip off into the vast darkness of space. Later. Granted, it wasn't quite so obvious and dramatic as that. What actually happened was, once the decision was made, Alexander Kerensky spent quite a bit of time getting all of the admirals and commanders on board with him, and then went to a man called Jerome Blake, the person who was de facto running the HPG network at this time. Not Comstar yet. Comstar will come later. This is back when it was still like publicly owned and traded, that kind of thing, when most people could gain access to intergalactic internet and space telephone. And he asked Jerome Blake, who is the de facto leader of the HPG network, to suppress all information of what he was doing until it was done. And even though he was very angry about it, the respect and understanding of Admiral Kerensky led Jerome Blake to agree. And so, under the false guise of military redeployments, training exercises, and peacekeeping operations, Alexander Kerensky slowly moved the entirety of the Star League's Space Force, the entirety of their army, the entirety of all of their armories and arsenals, factories, technology depots, everything. He emptied all of it, gathered it all up, and moved it to the north of the Inner Sphere. Not like actually magnetic north or like galactic north, it's spinward and like anti-spinward, but just look at this map. That is north. That's a good analogy. It is what it is. He went north, that way into space. They went to that away. By the way, I would just like to say he did such a good job hiding this and disguising his intentions that nobody actually knew what he was doing until he had actually fully left with the entirety of the Star League in his back pocket. And just this one quote is really good, so I want to point it. It's from Archon Jennifer of House Steiner from the Lyrian Commonwealth, commenting on the news that Alexander Kerensky just noped out of the Inner Sphere before the Succession Wars started. And it goes, and I quote, "Leaving? What do you mean, leaving? To where? He can't leave. Who's gonna pick up the pieces after we beat each other into oblivion?" End quote. Which I think is just fantastic. It's like even the heads of the great houses were like, oh, wait, shit, no, Dad, come back, please, we're not ready to handle this, come back, I beg of you. It's great, it's so funny. Just one of those wonderful quotes in Battletech that you can find in the books and stuff, just mwah, excellent. As for the actual Operation Exodus itself, this was a significant, mammoth event. This was not simply jumping from system to system, moving in a straight line away from the Inner Sphere. No, Alexander Kerensky was determined to make sure that no one, nothing, could follow them no matter how hard they tried. Before every fleet-wide jump into a new system, he would send out scouting fleets, massive groups of smaller ships, to survey and scout dozens of different systems in front of them, trying to find what would essentially be a golden path. Kerensky was looking for planets that were far enough away that they could make reasonable progress off into space rather than taking short, rapid jumps. He wanted to really get his fleet moving out there, but also he wanted to find planets that were far off the beaten path. He didn't want a standard, set, obvious path, so the actual route that was taken ended up being meandering and long and looping back over itself in many areas, because he was determined to make sure that nobody could potentially follow the jump signatures, nobody could potentially follow any evidence left behind, and even if by some miracle they could, the rapid and constant changes in the direction that they were moving and the meandering path they took would be almost nonsensical. People would end up simply jumping off into the void in the completely wrong direction than where they traveled. And to even further compound this, no evidence was left behind whatsoever. Even the chance of leaving evidence behind was unacceptable. Whenever there was garbage or damage or waste that needed to be disposed of from the fleet, it would be loaded up into smaller ships and jumped into systems well away or even in the opposite direction of where the fleet was moving, and it would be dumped off into the gravity well of gas giants or into suns to make sure that all debris and waste was utterly erased, that somebody couldn't accidentally follow the trail of garbage they left behind back to where they ended up. They also didn't make any form of mining outposts or any kind of colonies whatsoever. If they needed fuel or resources or minerals to keep the fleet going, it would have to be harvested from sources that could be explained as natural anomalies. Minerals would have to be mined from asteroids that wouldn't be missed rather than off the surface of moons or planets, because you can't explain a strip mine as an asteroid strike. Any form of chemicals or fuel that would be harvested off of suns or gas giants would have to be done in such a way that it wouldn't noticeably upset it or create some kind of lingering effect that people could see and notice as an anomaly. And also, no habitats of any kind could be left behind on any moons or worlds they passed by, no matter how tempting, no matter what. If they ended up on a planet and they built an outpost there to farm for food or to gather or whatever, then they would drop an asteroid on it afterwards to make all evidence disappear. The journey itself was long and grueling, lasting for what felt like decades along the way. It wasn't quite that long, but still, describing it as a years-long journey is pretty accurate. And they were really going out there, because remember, it can take weeks or months to charge jump ships, especially if you're jumping at maximum range and you're jumping way off into the void. Unfortunately for Kerensky, while initially everything went smoothly and according to plan, the journey had lasted so long that people were beginning to become furious. There was conspiracy theories that they were simply jumping aimlessly into the void to die. People believed that there was no goal in mind, or that they had already passed it, or that Kerensky had simply lost his mind. And so, with further pressure mounting, and the fact that the entirety of this exodus was beginning to grate on everyone involved, when this massive SLDF fleet came to discover 5 habitable worlds in one central star system, they decided this is where their journey ends. This was the Pentagon star system, the founding worlds of the clans, or what would come to be known. Before we get into the clans themselves and skip over a little bit of their early history, I feel I just want to talk about how many goddamn ships went. So at the end of the Civil War, the Star League Civil War, there was 113 divisions of the SLDF, right? Over 100 of them abandoned the inner sphere and left with Kerensky. This man took basically everything. 6 million personnel, an absolutely astounding number of people, over 1,300 jump ships, the giant buggers that carry smaller ships with them, 402 warships, basically everything in the inner sphere, and over 5,000 dropships. An absolutely ludicrous fleet. Basically everything humanity had jumping through space together. Is just, the scale of this is beyond imagining. Unfortunately, we're going to skip over a little bit of the early history of the clans because, well, the clans don't really come into being until the second Exodus. Look, okay, Kerensky tried his absolute damned hardest. Unfortunately, the reality was the Capellans are backstabbing pieces of shit and they cause all the problems in the universe. So, it's not that simple, but it's that simple, okay? After landing on these worlds, the unified Star League began to break apart. A lot of the old house tensions began to rise up. Members of, House Kurita, Steiner loyalists, Federated Sons idealists began breaking off into their own separate groups, and tensions and conflict began to mount between them, made especially worse that basically everyone was military personnel, and they didn't need a massive army in order to continue on. It wasn't necessary anymore. And readjusting to civilian life when they had the sum total of human arsenal stacked up in their garage was never going to go well. So, led by Alexander Kerensky's son, basically everyone noped off further into space. And that is realistically the true founding of the clans. Nicholas Kerensky, henceforth named Nicholas because Kerensky is the biggest dick man of all time and deserves to have his last name or surname spoken with admiration and reverence, so we're going to distinguish the two like that. Nicholas took the exiles even further out into space and decided that the real problem was that the different house feuds, the different small ways that they differed from one another were the real problem. The corruption of the inner sphere was their fanatical loyalty and identity built around these large great houses. And so what he did was heavily militarize the exiles in an attempt to forego the mistakes of his father, or what he saw as the mistakes. Instead, he separated them out into 20 clans of warriors, hence the name clans or clanners. And what he did was put incredible emphasis on honor, martial might, and martial skill. That these warriors would fight amongst one another. They would absolutely war, but they would never tear the clans overall apart for such petty reasons as national identity or pride or greed or any of that. And they would be wholly subservient to the ideology that Nicholas would pen. He also organized the civilians that followed along with them into a very rigid caste system, because what he saw as one of the main problems of the Pentagon worlds devolving into civil war was the blending of scientific, merchant, and warrior groups. You cannot make a farmer out of a soldier, and you cannot make a scientist out of a merchant, is generally the line of thinking that he went across. So, if you are a warrior, then that is your purpose. You are going to be the best goddamn soldier this universe has ever seen. You are going to spar and duel with the other clans. You are going to keep that martial mentality, and you are going to stay in the rigid, very hyper-focused framework that a military provides to stop them from breaking down into their petty squabbles like they had before. Merchants and engineers and scientists were similarly put into their own fields where they would best excel at, and this created the beginnings of the clan's very rigid class system. Over the hundreds of years that they were out there, this eventually became far more toxic and far more oppressive than it originally started as. Originally, the warriors were the most important, because Nicholas Kerensky was one of them, and he's always going to be the top dog, goddammit. But there was heavy importance placed on all of the support civilians and personnel that kept them running. Over time, it eventually morphed into the warriors being the very pinnacle of clan society. They had absolute say and absolute power. They did not bend the knee to anyone, and they did not listen to anyone. There were very rare exceptions. I think it was Clan Diamond Shark? Yeah, I think it was Clan Diamond Shark that had like scientists and merchants being roughly on par with the warriors because they viewed them similar to the people that like maintain the mechs. They develop our weapons, they keep the minerals and bullets running, so they're just as important to the war effort. So that's... I'm pretty sure it was Diamond Shark. I'll put up a different image if I'm wrong. I'll fact check myself later. But the clan's class system eventually solidified into the 5 classes that you have in the modern day of Battletech. The warrior caste at the very top. This includes your mech warriors, your pilots, your starship crew, your elementals, your tank drivers, all of them. Then below that, you have the scientist and engineering caste. They're called the science caste, but it's both of them. They do everything from developing new weapons to maintaining gear to basically unlocking scientific discoveries and stuff. They're viewed as relatively important, but not particularly influential. They're kept on a very tight leash, and the warriors don't want them going around and doing anything because, well, long story short, if people are in charge of making weapons, they might get the uppity idea of trying to use them on you, so you best keep them under lock and key. Below them is the merchant caste. They're viewed as a necessary evil, considering that their commerce, their trade, and what they provide is in often cases vital for the clans to keep functioning, because many of them don't have access to what they need to survive. Some clans may control extremely mineral-rich planets, but none of them have any atmospheres on them. So unfortunately, they have to trade for stuff that they need to literally keep breathing. Others may be incredible agrarian worlds, or they might be worlds that are amazing for training mech warriors and that kind of stuff, but they don't have the industrial base or they don't have the transport base. So merchants are generally looked down upon, but they're seen as incredibly necessary. The technician caste is even below them, and yeah, these are basically tech support guys. Look, the clans really don't look favorably on people who it's their entire purpose to fix machines and make sure technology is running correctly, because while the warriors are hyper-focused on combat, many of them are still technicians. Many of them will still be able to repair basic damage or still understand in depth the workings of their weapons because they train with them and they view it as their almost kind of sacred duty to understand and master their weapons. And then at the very bottom is the laborer caste, basically slaves. If you mine resources, if you farm food, if you're in charge of unclogging the toilets, congratulations, you are literally nothing. You are the very bottom of the barrel. Even Einstein is looking down on you despite the fact that he's basically the warrior's pet. It is the worst one to be in. Don't do it. If you can, be a scientist or a warrior. Both of them live very comfortable lives and are generally respected and left alone. There are actually some interesting things about the clans as well. Because they're such a military society, they don't actually have a separate government, police force, and military. If you are the head warrior, like the most seasoned mech warrior in a clan, then you are also the head of the police force and the leader of that clan. The military and the police are one and the same thing, and their government is essentially controlled by the clan leader. They are the person who makes any decisions, and their will overrides everything else. You can kill them and take their place, but, you know, in a society where killing the leader to take their place is very common, you better be damn good at what you're doing to hope to beat them in a fight. And with that, we have covered the origins and the early history and a brief makeup of the clans. So, there's not much else to cover. There's a lot of fighting that goes on. There's a lot of technological development. There is a lot of really cool stuff that happens, but we don't have time to cover all of that, and ultimately it's not super successful. Like going over how the first khans were chosen, what a khan is, basically a clan leader, that kind of stuff, right? We're not going to cover that. Instead, we're moving on to the second part of the video. We're going to talk about all the weird, strange, odd parts of clan culture and stuff that are just weird and we have to go over because I think they're really funny. So, firstly, space eugenicists. Yeah, they're... So the clans are not no Germans in space. I've heard people describe the clans as Nazis way out in the void. That is not true. They are absolutely eugenicists, though. The clans have a breeding program where they essentially select for the best genetics for their warriors, and they are extremely anal about making sure that everything is exactly as they like it. We're getting dangerously close to blonde eye... I was about to say blonde eyes and blue hair. You know what? Let's go with it. We were getting dangerously close to blonde eyes and blue hair, but you know what? We're not going that direction. However, we will go the direction of 10-foot-tall Amazon GF. So, one of the most notable developments of the clans was battle armor. Basically, baby mechs that are like 12 feet tall, right? They're not super huge, but they're pretty damn chunky, right? They carry like 2 or 3 short-range missiles and like maybe like a small or a medium laser or something, right? Like they're really small. They carry less weapons than a light mech. They're way lighter than a light mech, obviously, but they're not really, battle mechs because it's a suit of armor that uses some of that synthetic myomer muscle to actually move around, right? And they also got like jump jets on the back and stuff. The reason we're talking about 10-foot tall Amazon GF is, firstly, the clans don't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. If you can kick ass and take names, congratulations, you're going straight to the top. They don't give a shit about what's between your legs. And also, part of their genetic breeding program is that, if you are bigger, stronger, and smarter than any other warrior, obviously you would be better on the battlefield. So, holy shit. Having a literally 10-foot tall person is very common for the clanners. Many of them are fucking enormous. By the way, this woman, holy shit, her fucking biceps are probably as wide as your average man's torso. Like, what the fuck? Crush your head between these thighs. Motherfucker, she actually will. She'll paste it all over the fucking floor. But this genetic engineering leads into blood names. And this is one of the more unique parts of the clans, or at least one of the more weird parts of the clans. And basically, they don't have any surnames. After the first generation of warriors, like once they started, really getting the breeding going, there's no way to say that without feeling weird, right? They created something called the Trial of the Blood Right, which was established to allow warriors to win surnames of other warriors who originally had them. And these surnames became what was known as blood names. And basically, entire groups of warriors or clans would have them. So, like, for example, Kerensky as a blood name would be shared by multiple other warriors as all part of one clan if they originated from, Kerensky's stock. And they were like, there's no way to get around to saying that, is there? Whoever wrote this, man, you made the most awkward possible way of describing this literally imaginable. But if they came from Kerensky's soup stock, then they could claim Kerensky as a blood name, and anyone who wanted that would have to fight a trial and win in order to get that same blood name. I would also like to point out, you don't always have to kill people to get the blood name. Like, for example, there's a few dozen that can have a blood name at any given time, but often there are less, which is when big fights or a reaving happens where they basically purge the weak and the stupid from the gene pool. Granted, the weak and the stupid in clan space would be turbo overcharged humans in the inner sphere, but, potato potato. So if they have less people with the blood name than what they're allowed, so if they have like 1 dozen instead of 3 dozen, for example, then someone could be able to win a trial, not kill one of the people there, and still get the name as they kind of re-expanded, right? Looking for more strong warriors to add to their caste or their clan. And that's about everything I'm willing to cover about the breeding program and their blood names, because I don't think I ever want to say Kerensky's soup stock again. It's just like, who the fuck wrote this? Why? Okay, whatever, it's fine. Moving on, let's talk about the society of the clans, like their societal kind of viewpoints, how they look at the world, right? And we'll talk a little bit about how they talk. That doesn't parse. But regardless, because the clans have a lot of really funny ways of speaking and a lot of things that kind of make me go like, why? Who started this? How did it go? And we'll start with some social conduct. Firstly, they are the very definition of might makes right, okay? Their policing, their laws, their beliefs, basically everything is might makes right. If you are strong enough to enforce your opinions or beliefs on someone else, then in clan society, you are correct. It doesn't matter, although it gets a little fucked sometimes when you're like, beating the shit out of this guy for touching my toothbrush is perfectly justifiable. If you can get away with it, then yeah, congratulations, you're in the moral right. So it is a very violent society, but also they view the inner sphere almost in a pseudo-religious way as the lost paradise, like people view the Garden of Eden in Christianity, and they view all the people of the inner sphere as degenerates less than them that are polluting their ideal paradise. So again, I promise, I swear to God, the clans are not no Germans in space. It sounds like it, but they're not. They are also extremely honorable to an almost hilarious degree. When we get to the Battle of Tukiad, their honor basically forced them to throw their entire invasion fleet against a single super entrenched giga-fortified city, and it didn't go well, right? So their honor kind of loops back around to the point of being stupid honor, so you can kind of get an idea about it just from that. However, this is kind of morphed into one of the most hilarious violence is the name of the game societies ever, because in clan society, at least for the warriors and most other people as well, since warriors control society, the idea of laws or social procedures or really anything doesn't exist. It's a trial, goddammit. Trial of possession. You want to buy something, or you want something but don't want to buy it? I'm gonna fist fight you to take it. Don't want to listen to some orders or something that you were told, or you're absolutely pissed drunk and you're told by a bartender you have to leave? Trial of refusal. I will fist fight you so that I can deny whatever you just told me to do. What's that? You're looking for a promotion or a pay raise? Sorry, Karen. You have to go fist fight Marcus, the department boss, who's a 10-foot-tall hulking monstrosity if you want that extra 500 space bucks on your paycheck. This has led to some very funny social consequences. Firstly, the clans are a brutalistly, straightforward people. If a clan member says, I am going to jump off this cliff, or something along those lines, that's not hyperbole. They're not joking. They're not making it they're actually going to jump off that cliff. If they say that they are going to fist fight you to death in order to get another beer past closing time, they're going to do it. It's also created a condition where they are extremely honest, right? Clans don't lie. They also don't really steal or cheat. Of course, their penal system is brutal. Basically, if you break a law or go against what a clan leader says, death. That's the only option you have. So there's almost no crime in clan space. And this even permeates down the lower castes as well. So clan society is extremely rigid and remarkably homogenous and quote-unquote peaceful outside of the never-ending trials of combat that they have. Another interesting thing is because of their breeding program, they use in vitro fertilization almost exclusively among the warrior and scientist castes and stuff for making new children. So for them, sex has become literally not even something to worry about. If a clan, for example, here's a really good analogy, okay? You're just sitting in a bar, a clan woman comes up to you, there is no foreplay, literally nothing. They will walk up to you, be like, hey, want a bone? And if you say no, that's it, they're out of there. If you say yes, say goodbye to your pelvis. They have no social hang-ups whatsoever about sex. It's not viewed as intimate, it's not viewed as personal, it's not viewed as a matter of affection or love like you would see it in the modern day or in the inner sphere, right? It just is. It's something fun that you can randomly do, and there's no hang-ups about doing it with random strangers. If you see someone you like, go for it. That's their whole thing. It's kind of like free love in society. The hippie movement managed to take roots in the space Nazi, or not space Nazis. Well, enough about that. I said I didn't want to talk about Kerensky's soup stock anymore, and then we immediately went back to talking about the clan's soup stock. So, we're doing great. We're having such a wonderful time. You see what happens when Steve isn't here to moderate me? We just go off into the weeds. Let's talk about entertainment and the culture of the clans, the arts and stuff. Well, long story short, the clans have basically one sport. They have all of the sports of humanity, plural, but they have one sport, which is basically turbo football, where instead of linebackers pushing against one another, they're beating the shit out of each other until one side can't move, and then they just bulldoze their way across the field to score a point. So the whole purpose of sports in the clans, at least with the higher castes, entertainment with the lower castes is what you would normally expect from humanity. But with the higher castes, playing sports and stuff is intentionally to build teamwork. It's intentionally to build cohesiveness and to train people to act as a unit in combat and stuff. The clans basically play super football, that's their thing, but they also have soccer or lacrosse or, other things like hockey, right? They kept all of that stuff. but you'll almost never see clanners doing stuff like yoga or dance or gymnastics, because that's not really their thing. They'll do martial arts. They'll teach you how to punch someone real good, but they're sure as hell not teaching you how to be flexible and how to manage your inner chi. As for the arts and stuff, well, this is where we get into a little bit of the clan's religion, and a lot of people that know the lore are probably really angry at me because the clans are a de facto atheistic state. However, Kerensky has become, and his son, have become essentially deific figures. They're viewed as larger than life. Most of the clan's literature and artwork and that kind of cultural development is almost mythologizing Kerensky and the paradise of the inner sphere that they believe they had to leave behind, or that they were forced to leave. And it's almost exclusively focused on that. They laser focus in on it in the same way that a religious fanatic would focus in on whatever their faith espouses. So to say that the clans are pseudo-religious isn't wrong, because they are. They basically worship their past and their mythologized history. When it comes to things like music and media and television, it doesn't exist. Kind of. You see, the clans have very little tolerance for any kind of nonsensical or pointless stuff thrown around in their society, right? So on one extreme, you have clans that just say, absolutely no media, absolutely no music, there's no reason to have news networks or broadcast or television shows of any kind, it serves no purpose, if you want music, learn to play an instrument, done, right? That's the way that they view it, and the only broadcasts of any kind that will go out are necessary or military-based or whatever. Then you have clans on the other extreme where they don't really mind, but if you want to set up this kind of broadcasting equipment, if you want to create a television channel or something that, I don't know, shows news like unrelated to what's going on, like how was the harvest this day? What's the weather on insert random planet? Hey, did Larry die of that horrible skin disease yet? Well, then you're going to have to figure out a way to do that yourself. You're not getting any help from anyone and no resources will be given to you, but it's kind of permitted in a hand-wavy sort of way, right? And those are the two extremes that you find in the clans. Granted, they're all kind of on the we have no fun kind of extreme, but it is what it is. And finally, as for language, oh my god, the clans have so many funny things in their language, I love it. Firstly, they don't talk with conjunctions, like at all. Because saying that you're going to go get a burger is a really fast way to make sure that you are on your way to the hospital. The language that they speak is Star League Basic English. However, because they almost deify the old Star League and they have this mythologized version of their history, the events and the people that happened within, they also view that language as absolutely sacred. So using contractions like you are, is seen as both bad form as well as incredibly disrespectful. The easiest analogy I can come up with is some random drunk guy screaming at children on the street. That's the level of unacceptable and what the fuck that a lot of the upper classes and caste system have if you start saying contractions in front of them. They are fanatical about it. But also, because they're human, they're also raging hypocrites and are outright wrong about a lot of what they do, because they have an enormous number of words that are basically just contractions that have taken on a new name. For example, Bachal. The term Bachal is a contraction of the words battle and challenge, and the fact that clans use it is hilarious. It's literally everything that they don't like about using contractions, but it's fine. And this term basically has taken on the meaning of an official challenge that one undertakes when resolving issues. It's always a battle challenge, right? Always. Though the type of challenges between them vary. Like, it could be as simple as two people beating each other to death over an honor duel, or it could be the kind of thing where entire clans go to war with one another, with the prize being an entire world. However, the reason the Bachal is different than just issuing a challenge is because it's extremely formal. You have to list off when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, how many things you're bringing, how many things the enemy is bringing. The, person who started it or the defender or whatever can specify a certain location. or certain strategic limitations, like you can only attack from this way, or you can only assault this city, or you're only allowed to fight with these forces, right? It's extremely formal. My two favorite words, by the way, and more of them, I'm going to pronounce these incredibly wrong, and if there's any, like, turbo nerds for Battletech in the comments, just don't lampoon me over this, okay? I'm bad with words. So, the two words being used in a rhetorical, almost joking manner of, quiaff? Q-U-I-A-F-F. It means query affirmative. It's another contraction. Great. And quineg. Query negative, right? And you would use these if you're making an almost rhetorical / satirical comment, right? Like a clanner would go, so you're interested in Battletech lore, Quaife, right? And that would be like a rhetorical, fucking obviously you're interested in it. You're expecting an affirmative answer, because if you weren't interested in it, why are you even watching this video? And that would be kind of the way that they use their words, right? So the clans are extremely hypocritical, constantly, just like most human factions, and that's just yet another part that makes them just enjoyable to rummage through. Now, we're briefly going to glance over some of the technology that the clans have, because in general, you can simply assume clan tech is bigger, stronger, more efficient, and more powerful in exchange for generating more heat. They also have a lot of insane weapons. They have some special ones like the power armor, the elementals that the inner sphere doesn't have, and they have stuff like omni-mechs, where normal battle mechs, you can't just take components out and put new ones in. Like, you can't put a kinetic hardpoint in a laser hardpoint because they just don't have the mechanics there for it. The clans, they have special omni-mechs, and these ones, you can do that. That's another technology that they have that's special to the clans. But outside of that, there's not really much worth going over. There's probably going to be a specific episode dedicated to all of the ridiculous weapons in Battletech, and that's going to be in an entirely separate episode. And with that being said, that's going to end this video. We're finally done with episode 1 of the clans, their history and how they came about being. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. That's that. If you want to check out some other science fiction stuff, if you want to check out my main channel, it is The Raging Canadian. I do video game stuff. There's plenty of science fiction stuff. Dark Tide, Mech Warrior, that stuff posted there, as well as some other things. And if you enjoyed the channel, if you enjoyed the content, subscribe, leave a like, spread it around a little bit. The channel's been experiencing some pretty good growth. Let's keep it going, and have a wonderful day. Goodbye. Steve will probably be back for episode 2 tomorrow. Or not tomorrow, like the next episode. It's fine.